Dude, you are getting well. Dude.
I'm like already smiling. That was the best teaser ever. Yeah.
Yay.
Dude, the mantra. Yes, I love it.
Aw, I'm
Yeah.
so glad. I love like just showing surprising guests with that and see what their reaction is. It's cool. I mean, I've had everything from that to
What was that?
just like waiting for the question. It's
Oh,
great. So that was a great response. That actually was shot in Costa Rica in January
nice.
when I ran into a videographer friend that shot a music video in Brooklyn for me. It was, and you know, the universe just puts us together.
Awesome.
So, dudes, this is an amazing human that I love that's in my life, that's an inspiration and a friend, and I think is doing really awesome things in the world, and I've always admired since I first met her. So without further ado, let's welcome, I just made that up. Let's welcome Anne Therese.
Thank you. I'm in the show.
Climate optimist. So how are you doing today, Anne Therese?
I'm doing great. I was just telling Ben before I got here, I was outside planting trees with
Ooh,
one tree for the planet. So it was really fun. Yeah. I
yes,
feel
I
like,
love
my
that.
endorphins are high and I've just been like doing good work. Yeah, I felt great.
Ah, I love that. I've been uprooting things in my yard, which also feels awesome. I've never had a yard, so I can
Getting
imagine.
dirty is so magical. It's
Isn't
something
it
to it.
cool?
Yeah, I
Like
love
as a New
it.
Yorker, I'm like, oh God, I have to go wash my hands, and like, where I can't even find a bathroom right now, and then they're like, and now I'm like in the rural areas, like I'm rolling in the mud. I'm like Huckleberry Finn. That's what my friend calls me now. Where do you live now? We've been like playing house, back and forth. You guys have been all over the map in a beautiful way, finding peace and center. Where do you live?
So we ended up back in New York, actually,
All
um,
right.
but on the kind of high
Back
upper
in New York.
west
For
side,
those who don't live in New York, where in New York are you saying?
Upper West Side,
Yes, the
and
New
like
York
up in the
City.
hundreds. So yes,
Yeah.
New York City. Sorry, not New York State, New York City.
Yeah, us New Yorkers are just like, yeah, I live in New York. And everyone
I
around
know,
here
I
just kind of
know.
understands that means New York City.
Yeah,
The people
sorry. I
around
know
the
you're also
world
New
are
York.
like, where is that? Where? It's a big state.
It is. Yeah.
So you've searched, you've been out in the woods, you've been out in nature, you've created gardens, you've planted trees, you've come back here. What brought you back to the city?
It was a tough decision. We almost settled down in Massachusetts the past 2 years, because we both love it out in nature. But it was
Mm.
something about New York. We didn't feel like we were quite done with the city yet. So we're back for now.
And are
We're
we
really,
ever really done?
I don't know if we're ever really done, but honestly, we're so fortunate because my husband's mother lives up in Massachusetts too. So we get to escape every now and then. I was just there this weekend, so I get my nature in and my dirty fingers and all that. So it's a good mix. And I have the park right next door too, so I can just step out and get some fresh air and hug a tree. And yeah, I'm surviving.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. I'm all about hugging trees. It's probably one of the reasons why we became friends. Um, one of the reasons I brought you on the show, and listeners, one of the reasons I brought, listeners, you know what I want to say? Whether you're here live right now, past, present, or future, I want to say thank you and welcome. And if you're here listening right now, because I see you, I know that you are, I want you to comment below. Yes, you might have to do the little permission thing, but just let us know you're alive. It's checking in, like, and if you're listening, you can actually like check in, like, am I actually live right now? Okay, yeah, good. I find check-ins a great way to be well. But one thing that I know coming up in the world and all the time with so many people I talk to, my partner included, myself included, is like depression and anxiety about the climate and the state of the world. And Cassie, my partner, and I already talk. I just saw some of the listeners drop as soon as I said comment that you're alive. They're like, nope, see ya. I I love people. Um, Yeah, we've even shared like, should we bring a child in this world? Like, it's pretty messed up. I don't know. And then we're like, well, if anyone's child's gonna help save it, ours will, you know. And then like, well, how about the carbon footprint and all that stuff? So like, either way you dig it, you can always find proof or reasons to be depressed or anxious. And I met Aunt Therese at a time when I was sort of transitioning in my life, and we were still like making this 4-bedroom apartment in the upper west side, like Washington Heights work. And this wonderful human came into our lives as a roommate and was a model and an activist. And we had a lot in common, from the like entertainment and arts and fashion to caring about the planet. And I learned so much from you. You were one of the first people that carried around all their utensils in a straw all the time. I really I talk to Therese, I think about you every day. I've been talking to every single business owner here in Rhinebeck about why they're using plastic, why they're not using vegetable alternatives, why they're not recycling, and also taking responsibility for my part and let them know from now on I'm going to bring my own stuff. And if they won't refill it, then I'm going to have to start shopping elsewhere.
Thank you.
So I think about you and straws all the time. I'm like, and I see this in the ocean as a surfer. That's when it's really become real for me. It got more depressing when I got out into the ocean. And now there's a fact that microplastics are just like a part of life that we live with and have. So I've said a lot, but that's all like, you're the person I share that stuff with. You're the person I feel like can understand, and you're the person who I've watched change her mentality and help transform other people's around the climate and what we can do for it and ourselves. So thank you for being here. And what do you have to say about all this?
Well, thank you, Ben. And I feel so honored when you share these stories. And first of all, I loved being a roommate with you guys. I still consider you guys my family. So that was a lovely time.
Yeah.
And I remember back then I was really hardcore, like bring your own stuff. And I would like go and preach this to everyone.
I loved it. We learned a lot. We
Great.
started cooking
You
a
were
lot
very
more,
open and
eating a lot
receiving.
less meat. We're always open.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want the world to be better. It helps to be open.
Yeah. But what I learned is not everyone is going to take it the right way. And today I actually do host workshops on this topic, and I help companies and their employees better understand how to have more involving, engaging conversations, how to help onboard people and not actually create them, on the other side. And, there's ways to talk about this where you can shame or blame someone, which is just going to have that person turn the other way, or actually be, inviting and say, it's not technically your fault, but you can still be part of the solution. And that's something I actually want to come back to, because when you mentioned you guys discussing should you have a child or not, and we have been in similar conversations. And I think the biggest mistake we're making or doing is that we keep telling ourselves a story that we are the problem. And the only way that we can fix this is by minimizing our footprint as much as possible. So basically the story we hear is that just by being human, I'm at fault here. And how do you love yourself in our own species if that's the story that you hear? Yes, we have created a system and a world that by just existing in this system, we're actually contributing to climate change, which is not great, but it's a system that's bad, not the species itself. And I think by telling the people that you shouldn't have kids because we are the problem, it's going against our very nature. Like we're supposed to have kids, like it's in our bodies. Like I'm in that, age myself. Like now is the time when I want to start expanding my family. And so I think when we start to close that door to what's actually organic and natural to us, we're even detaching ourselves further from our own humanity. And I think we shouldn't be less humans. We should be more humans today. So I think that is the first shift I want to make to people. It's like, it's actually not your fault. You were born into this world. The world is not working right now. You happen to just exist in a system that isn't perfect. So being completely zero waste also is impossible. Like just recognize that to begin with. And then secondly, therefore it's not your responsibility to fix this. And I think we keep telling ourselves it's urgent. We have to act now. It's our responsibility to hand over a better future, yada, yada, yada. But that's a very heavy thing to have on your shoulder. Like it's my responsibility to fix the earth or whatever. I think if we move away from responsibility and instead say, well, it may not be my fault, but I'm still alive today. And I have the opportunity to participate in a shift towards a better world. And every single day I get to wake up and say, I have an opportunity to be part of this. Do I want to make history? Do I want to actually go for something even better? And if we start telling that story, it's going to be much easier to take action and also much more fun, because this is the life we're in and this is the world we live in. And I think it's sad if we miss the point that it's a beautiful world that we should be appreciating, and also a beautiful life that we should, honor and respect as much as possible.
Amen. That's awesome. I really love that, everything you said. Wow. Especially, there's so many opportunities to blame and shame. That really stood out to me. And then there's also the the responsibility aspect, and the, like, we don't have to be less human, but that we can actually be more human. I mean, I think that's incredible that there's ways actually to show up. So how could we be more human?
Well,
what does that look like to you?
Yeah. So for starters, I think it's, again, practicing love as much as possible. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but love is the answer to everything. And
oh no, I'm totally, yeah.
Yeah, I know you're on board with this, Ben. You're
if people are still here listening, then they're,
Yeah. Well, I think it's really simple. Like, to be human is not complicated. It is today in today's world. And I know that the complication, ends up where we try to be more human in the current system, which can be difficult. But I think also the system is already changing. But I think it's just slowing down more, taking more time to just be here, tap into ourselves, meditate if you want to, or just sit in nature and listen to the birds, see your partner, put your phone away, and try to actually be more in the present moment. And this is what everyone's talking about in wellness too, but I think it goes back to actually healing the world. I think we have to recognize that by healing the planet, we have to start by healing ourselves first. So mental health is so important. But I think by just recognizing who we are and the role we play in this community, we can come back to community. I think as we start to live more in community again, with our neighbors, with just the world around us, with our people, with our family, just like that care that comes from living in community, that in itself is going to spark much more sustainable options, more like regenerative, just way of living. And I think when you talked about, getting dirty and how that feels great. And I think as humans, that is part of what we want to do. And we have been so distanced from that because we just expect to go to the grocery store and pick up whatever, it's available. And then we come home and put on Netflix and put the food in the microwave. And that's not saying it's a wrong way of living, but we have gotten detached from what it actually means to be human, and living with nature, because we are nature. Nature is not separate from us. And I think, another thing too, I said that it's not just about minimizing our negative footprint, but we can actually maximize our positive footprint. So by recognizing that we do play a part in the cycle of life, we also belong on this earth. We are nature, just like everything around us. And something simple as composting. Just by composting your food, you're allowing for food scraps that would be waste to go back into the cycle, to become fertilizer that can then nurture the soil and grow more food. And so just by inserting yourself into that cycle, you're actually part of the positive footprint. So I think, telling that story of okay, what can we do? What can we learn from everything we've studied and, seen over the years? And just, tell ourselves a different story of what does it mean to actually be a human and to help participate in that positive cycle. That's
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one action I'm pulling out of that, because you're brilliant, and this is going to be soaking in for a while, I'm sure. And I highly encourage you listeners to listen again if you need to soak that in, because you have a lot of really profound, powerful things to say. And I don't know if everyone, is used to accessing this kind of optimism about the climate. And one great thing I learned from New Yorkers, and, I always think the devil's advocate pops up in my head a lot. I love to think about both sides a lot. And that's why I love being an actor. And what's it like over there and here? And, what comes up is, well, how am I going to compost in my city? And you can actually, by living in New York, I learned that you could start asking for your landlord to compost. You can actually just Google compost in my neighborhood. And I found out 3 blocks from me, there was a trash can, an orange one that got picked up by the city once a week in front of a garden. I could just walk by there on my way to the subway. Now, it was 2 blocks out of the way. And I remember sometimes my friend being like, oh God, we were always like, oh, we have to go the extra 2 blocks. But I kept thinking about all of our trash. Literally, we went from changing our trash every day to once a week because of the amount of food that we were suddenly, and then you think about stinky food. So I learned also the secret of just putting in a freezer in a plastic bag, and then you can just carry the bag, and it's like still frozen as you're carrying it out and dumping it.
And can I just add to something real quick? Because
Yeah.
people listening be like, I'm not going to walk the extra 2 blocks. And I understand, I'm lazy too. I'm actually lucky we have composting in our
We had to
building.
take turns because we were all like, it was like, in New York, you're like, well, that's an extra 5 minutes of my day.
Oh yeah, it takes time.
Yeah.
But I will just say, I think, yeah, sometimes it will require a little extra work or just something going out of your way. But just to know that right now we're wasting about 40% of all food being produced in the United States. And why that's so bad, not just, just the pure fact that we're wasting resources, right? But when food ends up in landfills, it gets very tightly packed without oxygen, which means that this compostable matter can't be composted. And so instead it ends up going like a very slow anaerobic decomposition, but that means that a byproduct is being produced, which is methane. And methane is somewhere between 30 to 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And so just by putting food in the trash, you're actually contributing to climate change. And I think that's the simplest action we can do as individuals, because 43% of all food waste comes from our homes. So just knowing that we are throwing away a majority of all this food means that we have the power to do something about this. And by removing that methane creation, we're actually making a tremendous positive impact on the fight towards climate change. So just keep that in mind when you're walking those extra 2 blocks, like you're actually being a climate hero. And that speaks for a lot. So just, keep that optimism in mind.
Yeah. Climate heroes are sexy. That's
Yes.
cool. So did you wake up as a kid when you were a little girl? Did you think to yourself in Swedish, I'm going to be a climate hero when I grow up?
I think I kind of did. I always was very concerned about the environment. I was very early in my life, just very aware of how unfair things were around the world. Like I knew that kids in Africa didn't have access to water, and being a child in a privileged country, that just didn't sit well with me. And so early on, I felt like there was this huge problem in the world that I wanted to be part of fixing. But it wasn't until I got older, I learned about climate change, I think watching The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore when I was 13, 14. And that was what really triggered my climate anxiety, actually, because I watched this film and I was thinking, okay, the world is about to change. Like we know this, we know the ices are melting. Like I was just expecting every headline to be about world leaders taking action to fight climate change. And as we all know, that didn't happen, right? And so watching the inaction and also observing that people around me didn't seem to care, like my family, my friends just went back to normal. And I'm like, guys, we just learned about this huge crises that we're actually facing. Like, why are we not acting on it? So I was pretty young. Like I said, I was an early teenager and didn't think I had any power to make a difference. So I tried to just ignore that I knew about this thing and hoping someone else was going to take care of it. But what I've learned is that over the years, I kept just building up this anxiety that soon enough will take over. Happy to go into that if you want me to. But yeah, I think that's what sparked it for me, was like just this growing awareness about everything that wasn't right.
Mm. So you're already experiencing these feelings then, right? And you felt like you couldn't do anything as a teenager. So how did you deal? Were you alone in those thoughts? Were anyone else around you thinking this? I mean, I remember learning about this as a kid in the 80s, like that things were a problem and we need to start recycling. And it's like only now that companies are like, we're going to start recycling. And you're like, well, thanks. It's, 30 years late, but yes, better late than never. Were you alone? Were you like, my sister was like the lone recycle girl growing up. Like no one else knew, or they were like, why are you recycling? Like your family's really intense about recycling, guys. I thought my sister was like extra about recycling. It turns out she was like on the right path. So what was it like for you?
Very similar. I was definitely the recycling cup. I worked at the coffee shop for 10 years, and every single day we would create so much waste. and we had huge buckets of plastic and all these things. And we had recycling because Sweden has been on the recycling journey for a long time. So people knew about recycling, but people were just lazy, you know. It was like they weren't like really tapped into the problem. But I kind of deep inside knew that something wasn't right. And I'm like, why are we throwing this away when it could be recycled? So I would have to go and just like take things out of the trash and put them in the right bin. And
That's
like, I
totally
was
me with
definitely
all
that
my
person.
roommates.
So yeah, for sure, I was that person.
What about like emotionally? Like, how did your friends treat you being that person?
I was probably a little bit annoying, to be honest with you. It wasn't an issue until later, like in my early 20s, when I decided to go vegan for the first time, or decided to go vegan. Not anymore, but I was vegan for a while. And that was when I think I'd reached a point where my climate anxiety was really potent and just strong. And learning about the food I put on my plate and how that contributed to deforestation and climate change, but also the ethical, parts of eating animal. Um, it was just such a wake up for me where I'm like, whoa, I feel like born again. I'm into this new
Hmm.
world and I feel like I've seen the light and I can actually have a huge positive impact just by choosing what I eat every single day. And so I felt like I had reached nirvana in a sense and wanted everyone else to be on this journey with me. And I was trying to do this in a very forceful way. So that's when I started to like ruin parties and maybe lose some friends and, starting to get more and more like kind of difficult to be around, if you put it that way. But that took me a while to grasp, like, how do you actually act in the world as the change you want to be without, chasing people away, and actually, being inspiring over just overwhelming and sort of like an annoying person to be around. But yeah, I didn't realize I was dealing with climate anxiety for a long time because I didn't talk about it. I was trying to, my method was to just ignore the fact that I knew about it, focus on school, focus on parties, like all the things you do as a young person. And I didn't recognize that I was building up on all these anxieties, but from time to time, I would start crying in the shower or yelling in the woods. And I was just holding on to so much
Hmm.
anger. And I developed an eating disorder too. I specifically remember starving myself because I knew the animals were hurting. So if I could feel
Hmm.
pain, I was like, connecting to their pain. And I felt like I was part of the whole journey in that way. That's not how you help someone, like, don't hurt yourself to help others. Like, you want to be as strong as possible. But I didn't see that. So I was definitely self-inflicting pain for a while and having no one to talk to about it. And it took me
Hmm.
years to really, it was actually during COVID when I had time to reflect and go a lot on mountaintops and really sit down with myself and like, what are you doing to yourself? Like, why do you keep hating yourself so much? Um, and I recognized it was because of all this work. I was so aware of all the damage in the world.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I can resonate with some of that. And I've watched my partner go through a lot of that. And I think I always try to be the eternal optimist, and sometimes I wonder if that keeps me disconnected from reality. But I just feel like there's like, as I started to see how much damage I did to myself through my own and self-inflicted suffering, I realized that I could actually choose my outlook. And so I start to choose thinking positive. Like, how could this turn out better than we imagined? How could I make a difference? Like, what's one thing in my immediate circle that I can handle? But to talk about what you're sharing with, I think a lot of people can identify with trying to like be a martyr by getting down in the trenches with someone. We're taught to like get down in there with them, but if we're harming ourselves because they're hurt and they're down, we're like hurting ourselves is not, two hurt people doesn't equal one whole, right?
Yeah.
So if we can take care of ourselves and nurture, even understanding, I think, our own pain, listening, that you took the time. What I heard you share is you taking time to go into nature, to listen, to be quiet, to start to ask questions of what's going on inside of you and to learn from it. And rather than judging it, start to see what you could create from it.
Yeah, and I feel so. There's one thing I want to share. I think I read this in a book once, but if a friend of yours falls down into a hole in the ground, you don't want to jump down and be like, "Oh, hey, I'm here with you," because he's going to be like, "Idiot, I'm not going to get out now." You want to actually, find a rope and muster your strength and pull your friend up in the hole. So I think that's just, I keep coming back to that reminder of, if someone is in need of your help, don't stoop down to their level of pain, but, be strong for that person and instead invite that person up to your level. Easier said than done, obviously, but just like easy reminder to keep in any work that we do. And I think something too that I call myself, the old version of myself was an angry activist. That was before I started my climate optimist journey. And I think as activists, if you are very aware of a problem, anything climate change, environmentalism, or mental health, whatever it might be that you're very passionate about, if that was sparked from anger in the first place, which usually happens, like, okay, I don't agree with this, like, this is awful, I want to make a difference, you tend to think that the only thing that can keep you going is, fueling yourself from the same energy. So like remaining
same anger.
angry.
Yeah, you have to keep tapping into that.
Right. And tapping, and it's like,
yeah.
And that's going to get to a point where you're just too overwhelmed. Our brains don't work that way. So although it's a very good triggering energy, you have to some point position into, optimism, a new outlook. Like you said, like telling ourselves that maybe things can be better, just allowing yourself to have that thought of like, this is the world we know today, but that doesn't mean that the world of tomorrow is going to be worse. It can actually be better. And I think that is something that we have to keep coming back to, of like, okay, we know the world that we don't want to see, but what if we actually start taking action towards the world that we do want to see? We just have to start consciously and courageously choosing that change. And how do you find that motivation? It's not by fearing yourself into that change, but actually to stay curious and be motivated. And that comes from strength and optimism. So it's a lot to be said about optimism, but yeah, I think the healing part is really essential though.
Yes, I am all about that. Wow. If you're listening, this is Therese on climate optimism and how to actually deal with your climate. What did you call it? Climate anxiety. Yeah. And general, like it could be about the whole world or the planet or the world at large or anything in your life, that calamity thinking that we have. These are actually direct access tools to transforming that. And you've done an amazing job of doing that in your life. And you went from doing so much of this alone. Oh, and I want to remind you, if you're listening too, just to subscribe or tag a friend here so that we can help spread this message and these positive messages in the world, because the media does thrive on rage, is the most profitable emotion in the world, but it is by far the most destructive. And love, as you're saying, actually nurturing yourself, is by far the most positive, transformative energy in the world. And so we're talking about tools for how to access that and get out of the, suffering and into the thriving and actually see what you can do. And I love this access of climate positivity. So thank you all for being here, and Therese, I'm so excited that you're here with us. You went from being alone and starting to figure out ways to make change and shifting, and you sat on mountains and COVID, and was there an opportunity that you realized, like, how did you go from doing it alone to allowing other people in? Like, was there a moment where you had to ask for help, or where you started helping yourself? Like, what was actually, let me ask you, well, yeah, go ahead and answer that. I've already asked you. Go ahead and answer
I'll answer
that.
it quickly.
Yeah.
But
No, you don't have to answer it quickly. Whatever's up for you.
I did ask for help. I did have a coach/therapist for a while, just working on some of my own old wounds that I hadn't been dealing with. So that was my personal journey. When it comes to climate anxiety part, I think a lot of self-reflection helped me, but also community. Just Instagram. I started, sharing some things that I was going through and realizing so many other people were going through the same things. And unfortunately, climate anxiety is really spreading. So a lot of people are feeling this today, which is sad. I mean, 4 out of 10 kids today don't want to have children because they're worried about climate change. So like already there, it's like almost half. But yeah, it was just, having conversations. And that's something I want to say too. If you are dealing with any of these thoughts, start talking about it. Don't keep it to yourself. And also have a conversation and say that it's okay just to express that you're worried. I think everyone is slightly worried about climate change. And I think just starting by being honest about that is like, okay, we don't know what the future will look like. And that is pretty terrifying. And just honor those feelings. I think downloading those feelings and just letting ourselves feel that and go through it is the step one, which I'm sure you're very well aware of, Ben.
Because but it's a great reminder. Like,
Yeah.
let's just not skip over that to
Okay.
actually stop and feel your feelings. So there's
Yeah.
the saying that the only way past it is through it. And so actually, if we feel our feelings, the statistics show, the science shows that they can pass way quicker than if we try to submerge them down and then they come out. There's all these other horrible ways that can destroy us.
And also, I feel like we don't give our hearts enough credit. We
Hmm.
fear feeling certain things because we don't think we can take it. But actually, the heart is the one muscle that the more you add to it, the bigger it grows. You know, it doesn't get overwhelmed. You actually just get stronger, have more humility, feel more love. I mean, if you go through any sort of hardship in life, you know what I'm talking about. You know that actually makes you stronger. And I think when it comes to climate change, we have to just start by feeling that we need that strength to find our way through this all. So I think what you just said, you know, if you have a day when you feel really just kind of off it or down, I love journaling because it helps me put thought to paper. So just write down everything you're feeling, read that out loud to yourself. If that makes you want to cry, then please cry because crying is so helpful.
Yeah.
Scream if you have to, punch a pillow if you have to, but just embody your own feelings because, like you said, that is the fastest way to let them go. And understand that you don't have to hold on to these feelings to make a difference. Again, you can let them come through you, learn from them, and see like, oh, there's a message here. I don't agree with this world. I don't agree with this future I'm being told is going to happen. So now I recognize that, but how can I then transition that fear, anger, frustration into something powerful? And that's where you have to, you know, find those steps. And that can be joining a community or just taking one small action, like working away with your compost. But inserting yourself into the positive action will actually help you to begin with, but also then participate in the change that we want to see. So many things to talk about there, but I think just again, starting with like acknowledging it's okay to feel this way.
That's great advice. That it's okay to feel this way. Because also, if we make our feelings wrong, they're also going to keep coming back. I think lessons keep, we're like, why am I going through this again? Sometimes you have to keep going through it until you're actually willing to learn the lesson. If you don't know what the lesson is, it could be something as simple as like giving your self a little more compassion and space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't take time for your wellness, you'll take time for your illness. And the best gift I think you could give the planet is probably to take care of yourself, of ourselves, right? So what are some of the ways? So you said you learned to. So we were talking about asking for help, and when you learned to do that, talk us through like the dark night of the soul that led you to, like your most intense climate anxiety that really led you to transform this, like the bottom that you had to hit to go through it.
I try to think if there was a bottom. I mean, there have been times where I have this one time, it was Thanksgiving in San Francisco. My husband and I lived in San Francisco for 2 years, and we didn't leave the city like everyone else. It was just the two of us there. But we went out for dinner. It was nice, and we were coming home. And out of nowhere, I started crying, like hysterically. I just couldn't stop crying. I was slamming my hands on the board, and he was like, "What's going on?" And I honestly didn't know what was wrong. And he's like, "Do you want me to keep circling?" And like, "Yes, please keep circling it for a few blocks." And finally, he
Mm.
left me in the car, and I had to sit and just cry it out. And then I went home, and I just couldn't understand what was going on. And it took me a while to realize that it was just. So what I did in the beginning was I was trying to be an optimist by ignoring all the bad and only focusing on the good in the world. But every time I stepped outside and I saw someone drinking with a plastic cup or throwing trash in the street, I realized that the world wasn't as beautiful as I wanted it to be. And I
Mm.
think I was trying to, again, not let myself feel those feelings. And that's what made me so unbalanced. So I had a few of those where I just would completely lose it and be very angry with myself. And I recognized that almost every morning I woke up feeling very just like not settled. There was something there I couldn't put my finger on. And I would overwork myself. I was working all this single time. And I just would never give myself that break. And if I did, I was anxious about not doing more.
Mm. Yeah.
So that was it. Was like, this is not a healthy way of living. I'm actually not being here for it. So I think that was a turning point for me of like, do you want to live life now? Or do you want to look back and say, wow, I missed out on all the opportunities to see the beauty because there's so much around. So that was the turning point for me.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and those feelings. And What are some of the ways you like? How did you access climate? How did you access optimism? In your times when you're like, so the negative mindset, we know if we have a lot of these thoughts and these thoughts are getting greater and we're thinking about them and they're snowballing, it's because whatever side you grow feeds, wherever your energy goes grows, right? So if you're if you're used to, and you even come from a family that has a naturally negative mindset, or pessimistic, or likes to complain or vent, or friends agree in that, that becomes like a groove in a record that gets really familiar, and easily the needle can fall into that. That's like the repeating pattern we've programmed our brains for, and we're inside of this place of darkness. How did you access optimism in those times of darkness?
That's a great question, and I'll give you a little just run through of what I think is climate optimism and how to do it the right way. So I mentioned that I started out doing it the wrong way, which was, again, just trying to ignore all the bad and just staying in this toxic positivity and always smiling and being optimistic. And it just wasn't working, right? So I recognized that the first step is, and I tell myself this all the time, awareness hurts and that's okay. Being aware comes with pain because you realize there are certain things that you don't agree with, and that's painful. But it's okay. It's okay to feel that way. So awareness hurts and that's okay. That's the first step. And then
It's beautiful.
Thank you. And then the second part is that it's choosing optimism is not enough. You can't just say, I want to be optimistic and I'm going to sit here and pray for things to work out. Because at some point you're going to start to feel like you're fooling yourself, and you look around yourself in the world and there's so much negative information out there. And so it's going to be really hard to remain optimistic if that's the only thing you're doing. So instead of choosing optimism, you have to create optimism. And I call it being an optimist in action. To actually earn being an optimist, because you are part of the change that you want to see. And what's so beautiful about that is that you actually become your own source of optimism, because you start nurturing that optimism from within every single day. And it can be small things some days, like just I'm going to compost my food because that's what I do. Maybe another day you show up for a tree planting event or a beach cleanup, or you join a community, or you try to talk to your local electives about installing more solar panels, whatever it might be. But just by inserting yourself again into the positive footprint of like, what can you actually contribute to this world? And once you start to actually actively be the change, it's really hard to not be optimistic, because you're like, wow, I'm proving to myself that we can actually do this. And yeah, I thought it was going to be hard to say no to plastic, but actually all I needed was 1 cup and whatever. And now it's very easy. So I think the more you start to practice this, it becomes your new normal. And it just becomes a lifestyle that you choose to show up for. And that doesn't mean that I don't have days when I'm very worried, because I still am like, shit, are we going to figure this out? But I just continue to show up for whatever I can do, keep sharing what I know, have conversations with people to invite them in. And what you mentioned earlier, which is like allowing yourself to actually plant that positive thought in your mind of like, what else is possible? What if we did just change a few things, like maybe parking lots can become urban gardens, and something so simple, where like just planting more trees in the cities that can restabilize the microclimates in cities. And like there's so many things that we can do right now that can have a huge positive impact on the world around us and on climate change. And I think once you start to tell yourself those stories, it's kind of easy to be an optimist, to be honest with you.
Oh, I love that. That's like, I'm like, I want to be an optimist. Guess what? I already am, but I get to choose it. And I love that you said create it too. I was just, I shared this crazy, like, it's part of my day. Like I program fun into my day. So one of the ways I do it, can I share a way I do it?
Please.
So I'm starting to share them more on Instagram. I was like not sharing stuff like this, and then I realized, oh my God, people would probably love this way more than any like, deep message of me actually trying to reach their hearts. They're like, no, especially the guys. They're like, nah. So we got this, what do you call those little trampolines that are really famous now? Because Tony Robbins used one and he told everybody to get it. My grandma had one in the 70s. So, Tony Robbins. I know
what you're talking about. They're like mini versions. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some fancy name like a transformer or something, like reformer. That's the Pilates thing. But anyway, so we have it out in the yard in the grass, so we can like take off our shoes and go out there and just like jump, like you can run on it. And So I just like blast music, and if I'm feeling lethargic or sad or angry, or sometimes just between clients to move my body because I'm sitting, like I just jump on it, and I can get my anger out on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have all these things, like I have a kettlebell out in the yard and a pull-up bar and swings and a basketball goal and all these little things for me to like express, in a car, right? So I get in my car, that's like my sound box, to scream, to cry, where I know I won't, and like, you know, if I don't want to be asked how I'm doing and I just need to feel my feelings, bless you, that's one of the best ways I know. So if you live in Manhattan, you don't have a car, like love closets, love bathrooms, love drinking water. And so anyway, that's one of the ways I do it. So I posted a really funny video today of me doing it. Also, like Cassie loves to order things. So I used to make her like wrong about it, but now I get really like, now I like love reviewing on whether or not they use like recyclable materials, and like finding like the bamboo underwear, and the you know, the I gotta find supporting more companies that do the fungi packaging. But like there's so much we can do with the earth and mushrooms and the all the amazing mycelium in the world. So anyway, that's one of the ways oh, and so I was posting about it today. This is my whole point. My point was, I said, you know, you can only act your way into right thinking. The only way out of your head is into action, right? So you can't think your way into right action. You have to act your way into right thinking. So if you find yourself dealing with this constant negativity and pessimism, one of the greatest ways to shift that is actually to create something. And how can you create? Take one small action. So like, oh, we also have bikes in our driveway now, so we'll take like a little bike ride. And I used to do that in Manhattan too. Just something like go swing on the construction bars. What do you like, the scaffolding, like all over New York, you know, New York. There's always ways to get really creative. And you said something earlier too about getting in your body. And now people go to school for this, for like somatic therapy and things. And it's really, which is awesome to learn about, because it's really just connecting ourselves to our bodies, our hearts to our bodies. And more research and studies are showing we actually have 3 different brains: our heart, our heart, our gut, and our mind. Our brain, our mind, our heart, and our gut. Right. And they each have so much information. So as you're like taking care of your gut and feeding it well, and it can speak to you and you can get to know it, and your heart has even infinite greater intelligence than our brain sometimes, from the electromagnetic fields of it. And yet we're still in school programming thinking with our brains. So what I'm really hearing is you like leading with your heart and asking, you know, where in your body, and checking those feelings, and then doing one thing each day that makes you feel good. Like you planted a tree today. You could go like curse out the world, but is that going to like cause positive effects? No, it's going to create more trauma and drama. So what can you do? Like plant something. You know, you could look up on Amazon, if you're in your small apartment, right? Like a tiny an oxygen plant. Or I hate mosquitoes, so I ordered a bat house. Like, rather than spraying more mosquito chemicals, like you can get natural stuff. But I was like, oh, what eats mosquitoes? I love bats at night. That'd be so cool. Oh, getting creative. So what are some of the ways you do it at home?
Yeah, first of all, you said so many important things. I think everything you talked about.
Yeah, talk about any of them.
Well, I just want to say, like, just, you know, physical movement, play, you know, like jumping around, and, you know, with the bars in New York City, you know, it's like, it's just being playful. And I think it goes back to what we said earlier about being more human. You know, we're just taught, and you're an actor, so I'm sure you've learned this in, you know, in acting classes, but like, we're so taught to like live in the system and act a certain way and be cool and respectable. And it's like, no, we're human beings. Like, we want to be playful sometimes. We want to just move around and create art because we just want to create, and not because we want to sell a painting. And so I do the same. I go for walks 3 to 4 times a day. Love to listen to music, inspiring podcasts, but I also try to at least once sit down somewhere on nature, if that's a rock or under a tree or in the grass, and just like just for a few moments, just like feel the vibration of the earth, hug a tree if you can. Even in New York, it's okay to be weird. But I think just like finding ways to tap into your own body. And something that I like to remind myself, but also people that I teach and talk to, is that we're not going to figure out climate change tomorrow or next year or even 2 years from now. It most likely will be the journey of our lifetime. It's like, this is not a war to be won. It's not a fight, but it's a journey. And I like to think of it as a road trip, because when you go on a road trip, it's not like getting on a flight and then ending up at the beach in a few hours and then finally you can relax and have a good time. This is like hours on the road. It's an adventure. You're not going to know what's going to, pop up along the way. You may have an idea of the destination, but you can't really know exactly what it's going to be like. So similar to a road trip, we have to take off now, just head towards something different. Trust that we will be able to figure it out as we go along, even if our car breaks down or whatever it might be. But the most important part with the road trip is that, first of all, you have fun right away. So we can't wait until we figure out climate change to start enjoying life, because this is life. You have to take breaks and, fuel up the car, eat something, go use the bathroom. Because if you don't, it's not going to be a fun road trip. You're going to break down somewhere and get stranded. So similar to that, it's like we have to think of our climate work as that. It's a journey that we all get to be part of. And we have to find ways to enjoy that journey, to come together in community with other people, and just continue to be curious of like, how else could we do things? What if things can be better? And just let's try new things and keep going. And to having that open mindset of like, things can actually be better. We just have to continue to choose change and say yes to a better world. And I think recognizing that this is really the biggest challenge of today. And I maybe straying away from your question, Ben. I get so taken away by this. But the biggest challenge we're facing right now is recognizing that even though things may look good, we need to still choose better. Because we created a world that is very functional. I mean, we have electricity and like all these things, but right now we're heading towards our own demise. So in a reality that looks good on the surface, we have to still recognize that we actually have to choose change, and we have to start looking for better options. And that's our biggest challenge, because we could just be like, well, things are working, but they're not working. And I think that is why we have to apply this kind of like childish playfulness to it, of like, okay, let's just see what we can do next. Like being that adventurous guy again, go jump on your trampoline, go try something new and take the bike or whatever. And I think it comes back to being more human, being more embodied, having more fun, and just truly enjoying the ride, because we're all in for it.
Yes, we are, whether we want to be or not.
Yeah, that's the truth.
I think that's what I love about the one thing I saw, the positive that I saw in COVID is that the world all experienced something together for the first time in our lifetime. Because, we are really sad about the wars happening on our own turf. And in America, it looks like, like a lot of young white men running around with mental illness and high-powered machine guns, shooting groups of people. And then in other parts of the world, there's like massive civil wars. Mm-hmm. And people's lives being taken every day, and people being trafficked and things like that, and human trafficking, right? And that we're still like not valuing humans enough. And that has to start with ourselves. And it's really incredible to see how you're continuing to choose change, and that we can access it. I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but our brains, the one thing we know, like if you're a science nerd, like neuroplasticity, right? You can train your brain to do new things. You can train new pathways. You can reprogram things. I mean, there's people who are combat veterans. I know who's a mental health counselor who's been blown up 3 times. He's learning to reprogram his brain. Another friend who's a coach who's killed 500 people in combat. And, like he is one of the most amazing, healing, fun-loving individuals I know. And he carries those people as angels now. I was like, how do you choose that? How do you choose optimism there? He carries them as angels. That was his job. And he's learned to reprogram his mindset. And so there's actually, no matter what our past is, we could choose differently. And so you're a really great example of how we can choose today. And I love your voice and that you're leading it and doing workshops. So if you're just listening, thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe and tag someone who needs to know this. This is Therese, the climate optimist. Therese, where can we find you online if we want to take some of these workshops, if we want to get access more to some of what you've got, some of your beautiful medicine to offer? How can we find that and where?
Yeah, so I don't know when this is going to go live, but
I don't either. It's going to be so exciting.
sometime this year, 2022, probably summer, I will come out with my new masterclass. So look for that one.
Nice.
And it's the Climate Optimist Masterclass. We will go through everything we talked about today and much more. So hopefully you'll check it out.
Do you have a website?
Yes, go to theclimateoptimist.com.
Okay, great. I'll put it here in the comments. And are you on social media? Is it the same?
So I'm my name on Instagram with Therese Generi. I know it's long. Twitter Therese_G. TikTok Climate Optimist. I need to grow my TikTok though by getting there.
Need to.
I don't know.
Perfect.
I keep telling people who tell me I need to get on TikTok, so maybe one day.
Climate Optimist, and then on Instagram or your name, right?
Yes, and Therese Generi.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll type it in there for you guys. We'll have it in the show notes. This will be out in an email. It'll be on the podcast. You can listen to it. You can rewatch this. I have a few closing questions, if I may. So what is your daily wellness routine look like today?
So I like to wake up
on a good day.
I like to wake up early almost every day.
Whatever a good day means.
I love mornings.
So tell us, what does early mean to you?
It used to be like 4:30.
That's why I'm mentioning it. People are probably like, whoa, what?
But I got pregnant, so it's changed a little. So it's more like 6:37 now.
Wow.
Yeah,
congratulations.
I know. That's exciting. But yeah, I get up early. Usually I go for a walk before breakfast, but again, it's changed because I'm hungry I don't know. I'm very hungry when I wake up. So I eat something healthy. I love to go for a walk though in the first hour or so. Just silently connecting with nature or maybe listening to a podcast. And I get a lot of my creative work in the morning. I like to write in the morning. But then, it's usually gets slammed with calls and stuff. I have a lot of things going on. But try to go for another walk around noon and then another one late afternoon. And in between, eating lots of good foods. That's very important for me. So it's a typical day. I'm very
so lots of good exercise and food. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very like a lone wolf. I love to just sit with myself and create stuff. But then on occasion, I do go out and see people too. Yeah, that's my day.
So spending time alone is also part of that. And that's an important time. So that's something to acknowledge too. I love that. Like, we don't have to always be together, but you are practicing, taking time to do that below as well in your life. So it's really, really cool. I've practiced. I just did a drum doula ceremony. It was a medicine drum ceremony with Cassie in a tent with 16 women. There's one other guy, and it was super healing. It was like the first time I led a retreat in Costa Rica, but it was like really weird, and we all had to make sure we passed COVID test, and we might get stuck in the country, and it's kind of intense. But in order, like here, it was just like around a fire, and we sang and chanted and invoked spirits in the earth and created love and positivity and change and medicine through drumming and creating our own drums.
Invite me next time.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely going to lead some. And we're going to, our band Dirty May is playing the Grassroots Festival in Ithaca this summer, and we're incorporating the drums into our set as well. So it's really cool too. So your daily routine is really beautiful, and the exercise and nourishment, I think are so important that we can take little times and you can step out. What is the biggest challenge you face day to day now?
besides being pregnant. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, that could be it.
Um,
Being pregnant.
that was it for a while. I'm feeling better.
Mhm.
Biggest challenge, I don't, you know what? It's interesting because it used to be, I felt like I was always running against time. I used
Mhm.
to feel like I was never enough and whatever I was doing should have been out already. I just felt like this sense of urgency because I'm working in climate change. Everything is so urgent. And I've learned to just trust more because every time I'm stressing out about something, it always happens at the perfect time in the right moment. And if I just let things unfold as they're supposed to and just continue to show up for the work, and taking, risks and stepping in opportunities and all these things, but just trusting. And so I think that's just like, I'm much more grounded today. So I don't know if I struggled so much from day to day,
Mm, that's
besides eating enough
awesome.
food.
Yeah. I mean, that's what self-care can look like. Um, so if there was a movie about your life, uh, what would you name it?
um, from angry activist to climate optimist
Nice.
or something like that.
And what would your partner name it if he was Tyler?
Oh my God, I need to come up with something good for this. He always comes up with stories. Um,
This is the first thing that pops in your head.
living with a climate activist or something like that.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a lot
Um,
of stories to share.
and if you who in Hollywood would you cast to play your parents in the film?
Oh, well, this is going to be weird, but I have like I did this as a part of a healing exercise. So if I were to choose my parents today, I love Nikki Reed and Ian Somerhalder. They live in this ranch in Malibu and they're super eco and so cool. And I love everything they're doing. So they would be my parents.
Awesome. All right,
Yeah.
cool. I love it. Um, and lastly, if you could give the gift one, if you could give the world one gift today, what would it be?
I would give the gift of light and giving you the right to be light, to choose light, and to see light. And I say that because, as you were talking earlier and mentioning all the things that are wrong in the world, from gun shootings to civil wars to floodings and climate disasters, the more you learn and the more you stay in awareness, it's going to feel like you don't have a right to be optimistic. You don't have a right to feel happy and be light because there's so much darkness. And I think it's really important to remember that the more darkness we're immersed in, we need light more than ever. And you as a person don't just exist in a vacuum. We're actually a part of this network of energy that, is all of us. And this is where it gets more spiritual, but I truly believe in that. And so simply by choosing to be light and to just believe in something better, you're adding that energy to the collective consciousness. And so I think it's actually up to all of us to nurture that energy and to choose to be light for ourselves, for the people around us, but also for the world as much as we can possibly be. So I'm giving you the gift of being light, and choosing to be so and continue to be that light that others can, work towards and surround themselves with.
Thank you for that gift, taking that in. And if you if you gave the world the gift of light and the knowing of light and the being and the seeing of light, what do you see us all doing?
Oh, I'm getting a very hippie scene going on here, like running around naked in flower fields. No, I
Great.
don't
Oh,
know.
that's cool. Whatever.
Well, so whenever I envision light, I see people's eyes, because I feel like we can really connect with energy through looking into people's eyes. And I think you can really see that shift when there's a spark in people's eyes. And so that's what I'm envisioning. It's just like beautiful, powerful, deep eyes all over that are contributing to this collective consciousness.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for saying that. Um, I just remembered something I'd like to share with you. And that was I just did this retreat with a bunch of sober men in the Bill Wilson house. He was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was a really cool, sober spiritual retreat where we spent a lot of times just being with our feelings and practicing being vulnerable and without substances. And I watched, like, there was this guy there who had come years before who was a meth addict, and he had been Like he didn't even have a day sober, and he was there like 3 years later, and I didn't even recognize him. And he was like glowing and happy, and there was this light in his eye. And it's something that I've started to see in people newly, and people who choose to stop killing themselves, you know, whether through food or phones or climate anxiety or stress or work or, you know, that if we choose to stop, and it can just be one little thing, you know, that we start choosing something like light, like what would that look like? That sounds like such a privileged thing, but what if you have a moment to think, if you're here and you have the time to listen, then you have the privilege and the space every day, no matter who you are and how much money you have, to practice choosing light and being light. You know, Gandhi was one of the poorest people for so long. Jesus too, Buddha, like all the people were like, here's all of my belongings, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just remembered that from this, and like seeing people choosing, you know, I had this moment of seeing that man's eyes glowing, and I just want to thank you for that gift, because it reminded me, you know, of so much beauty, and I'm going to carry that. Like, I want to just like, I used to look at people's eyes in the subway, whether it freaked them out or not, because I just felt like that's a beautiful way to connect with people. Yeah. So one thing I'm going to take on this week after speaking to you is just looking people in the eyes a little more.
Love that.
I want to invite everyone listening to do that. And if what's one action you think we could take today for ourselves towards climate optimism?
Every time I get this question, it's so hard to answer, because it sort of depends on who you are, where you live. You know, we all can do different things. I'll give you the one answer I want to give is to slow down, to give ourselves the permission to slow down and take care of ourselves. Because when we are more grounded and we feel better and we're healthier, by default, we're going to make better decisions. It's just how it goes. So slowing down, although I know it's urgent that we act on climate change, I think it's even more urgent that we slow down to take conscious steps moving forward. And then if you don't already, start composting. That's my favorite climate action. So I'll just plug that in. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. I got really excited. I built a compost bin for the first time in my life. It's like my favorite thing to go take my food out there and be like, wow, look at it. And now I have this like really cute, not a groundhog, but something like that like lives nearby, and he eats the leftovers, and he's like super cute. It's like, it's all good. Yeah. Well, it's so wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for your time, and be sure to follow Therese Bengtsson. You can also look her up on theclimateoptimist.com, and you can follow her, and I follow her. I highly recommend it. And just remember, the one little action that you can do for yourself today could actually save the world. So thank you for being the change and reminding us that we have that opportunity to choose change every day.
Can I plug one more thing, Ben?
Yeah, please, whatever you want.
I haven't mentioned it yet, but I have a book coming out this fall.
What?
The Climate Optimist Handbook. So if anything today sparked your interest,
incredible.
I hope you check it out, because it's just a collection of all the things I'm trying to share with the world.
Well, if you have a mailing list or something, put me on it. I want to be one of the first people to order it. So let me know.
Yes,
yeah, I'll definitely plug that here for sure. And lastly, I'd like you to plug one thing for me. Will you say, dude, you're getting well?
Oh, yes.
Like you mean it?
Okay.
Okay.
Let me just get into this then. I feel like now I'm nervous.
No pressure.
Right here. Okay.
No pressure.
Wait, okay. Okay. Dude, you're getting well.
Yes.
Okay.
You heard it here. That was beautiful. You get the part. You nailed it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day. Thank you everyone for listening, and stay well.